chasing never comes from true desire. What we often mistake for longing, attraction, or passion is, in fact, a reflection of emptiness inside. When a woman finds herself constantly pursuing a man, it is rarely because she genuinely wants him in that moment. Instead, it is because a part of her feels incomplete, insecure, or unseen. She reaches outward in search of validation, confirmation, or a sense of worth that has been neglected within. This is the quiet, often unspoken truth that most women never realize. That chasing is an echo of what is missing inside, not an expression of authentic desire. True desire flows effortlessly, naturally, like a river that runs toward fulfillment without strain. Chasing is never that river. Chasing is the drought, the desperate reach for a drop that never satisfies because it comes from a place of need rather than abundance. When we chase, our actions are fueled by fear more than by attraction. Fear of rejection, fear of being forgotten, fear that love or attention will never arrive unless we make it happen ourselves. Every text sent too quickly, every call made too often, every plan forced into existence carries the weight of this fear. It is a silent confession of a void inside that says, I cannot be whole without his recognition. Desire, in its purest form, does not need to ask. Desire shows up naturally, willingly, in alignment with joy and curiosity. Chasing, on the other hand, is a demand. It is the mind trying to manufacture what the heart cannot yet feel on its own. Inner lack is not weakness, it is simply unawareness. Many women do not recognize that the pull to chase is a reflection of the inner emptiness that needs attention. We are taught to look outside for love, for approval, for the sense that we are enough. Society, culture, and even early relationships reinforce the idea that attention from another person validates our existence. And so, the act of chasing becomes normalized. We believe that persistence, effort, or constant pursuit is proof of love, but this is an illusion. The man does not fall in love with the chasing. He feels a pressure, a weight, and often a subtle loss of respect, not because he does not care, but because chasing signals dependence rather than freedom. Recognizing that chasing stems from inner lack is a radical awakening. It requires honesty, reflection, and courage to admit that no external person can fill the emptiness we carry. No amount of messages, gifts, or time spent together can replace the satisfaction of feeling whole within ourselves. When a woman reaches this awareness, she begins to see the patterns in her life. She notices the moments she feels compelled to seek attention, to demand responses, to prove her worth. She sees that these moments are not driven by attraction, but by the quiet whisper of her own insecurity. This is not a flaw, it is a signal. It is the body and mind pointing her toward the work of self-love and inner fulfillment. The beauty of this realization is that it liberates. When a woman understands that her chasing is born from lack, she no longer feels trapped in the endless cycle of pursuit and disappointment. She can shift her energy inward, redirecting her attention from another person's responses to her own experience of life. She begins to explore what fills her, what excites her, what makes her feel expansive and radiant without needing a man to validate it. She discovers hobbies, passions, friendships, and goals that awaken her curiosity and pleasure. Each moment spent in this way nourishes the soul and gradually diminishes the compulsion to chase. Desire becomes magnetic when it is free from need. A woman who no longer chases emanates a confidence that cannot be taught, it can only be lived. Men sense this immediately, though often unconsciously. The shift from need to fulfillment changes the energy entirely. She is no longer approaching from a place of deficit, but from a state of completeness. Her presence is alluring because it signals autonomy, self-respect, and an inner richness that cannot be taken lightly. Chasing, conversely, communicates incompleteness. It pushes the other away even while demanding closeness. It is the paradox of neediness. The more we chase, the further attraction recedes. To stop chasing does not mean to stop caring. It does not mean to become cold, indifferent, or unresponsive. It means to step into the understanding that the energy we put into another person must first be rooted in the energy we cultivate within ourselves. Desire thrives in freedom, in curiosity, and in the quiet confidence of being enough. Chasing dies the moment we stop giving our power away to the illusion that another person is responsible for our happiness. Instead, the power returns to us, and with it, the natural magnetism that draws attention without effort, the kind of attention that feels deep, meaningful, and lasting. When a woman ceases to chase, she opens the door to something far more powerful than control, manipulation, or strategy. She opens the door to authentic attraction, to feelings that awaken naturally in response to her presence, her light, and her energy. The moment she stops seeking, she allows the universe and the man to respond to her fullness rather than her void. And in that space, desire flourishes, connection deepens, and the magnetic pull she has always wanted finally arrives in its truest form. Withdrawal is often misunderstood. Many women fear it, believing that stepping back or slowing down contact will push him away or signal disinterest. In reality, withdrawal is not rejection, it is the creation of a sacred space in which emotions have room to breathe, develop, and deepen. Emotional space is not absence, it is the quiet, invisible canvas upon which desire, curiosity, and longing can be painted. When a woman steps back even slightly, she allows the energy of the relationship to shift. The dynamic moves from pressure and pursuit to reflection and resonance, and in this shift, feelings that were dormant begin to awaken. When we chase, we fill every corner of his awareness. Every text, call, or attempt to see him leaves little room for him to notice, to feel, or to wonder. His mind becomes accustomed to our presence and attention, and as a result, emotions stagnate. Desire needs breathing room. Just as flowers require soil, sun, and water, attraction requires a mixture of presence and absence. Withdrawal provides that soil, the quiet that allows longing to grow. When a woman steps back, she is not diminishing her interest, she is creating an environment in which his own feelings can emerge without interference, without manipulation, and without the noise of her pursuing energy clouding the space. The concept of emotional space is subtle yet profound. It is the recognition that people cannot feel deeply when they are crowded. When a man is constantly met with enthusiasm, availability, or insistence, his nervous system adapts to that energy. It becomes expected, predictable, and less stimulating. Desire and attachment thrive on the tension between presence and absence. Withdrawal introduces this tension in a natural, graceful way. It allows the man to encounter the woman not as an endlessly accessible figure, but as a complex, independent being whose life and energy exist beyond him. This shift is magnetic because it awakens curiosity. He begins to ask, to reflect, to notice nuances that were previously overlooked, and this noticing is the fertile ground for deeper emotional connection. Withdrawal is also an act of self-respect and sovereignty. It communicates that a woman's energy is valuable, that her attention is not to be given indiscriminately, and that her life is full and rich regardless of his responses. When a woman embodies this principle, she does not chase out of fear, need, or uncertainty. Instead, she withdraws with grace, knowing that her emotional equilibrium is hers to maintain. This equilibrium is deeply attractive because it signals maturity, confidence, and alignment. Emotional space is, in essence, a reflection of self-mastery, the understanding that one's feelings and attention are precious and should not be given away carelessly. The effects of withdrawal are often instantaneous yet subtle. A man who was previously complacent may begin to notice the little things, the way she carries herself, the tone of her laughter, the independence she radiates. He feels the absence, yes, but in that absence he also begins to feel presence in the sense of her energy, her life, and her self-possession. Space triggers longing because humans are wired to notice and desire what is not immediately available. When a woman allows that natural principle to unfold, she activates the emotional layers that chasing would have bypassed. Withdrawal is not a tactic, it is an alignment with the rhythm of human connection, a rhythm that respects both autonomy and attraction. It is important to understand that withdrawal is not coldness or indifference. Emotional space does not require shutting down or hiding feelings, rather it requires measured restraint and awareness. It is the conscious decision to step back without abandoning, to allow silence without punishment, and to create room without judgment. This requires trust, trust in oneself, trust in the man, and trust in the natural unfolding of connection. When a woman withdraws from chasing behavior, she is saying, I honor myself enough to maintain my own energy, and I trust the relationship to respond to authenticity rather than need. This trust is profoundly magnetic because it communicates inner security, which is far more compelling than frantic pursuit. Withdrawal also allows a man to feel the weight of his own emotions. When there is no constant chasing, he encounters his own thoughts, his own desires, and his own reflections on the woman he cares about. Space is the mirror that reflects feelings back to him in their purest form. Without pressure or intrusion, he begins to feel not because she demands it, but because his own emotional system is activated by absence. This feeling is deeper than surface level attraction. It is the stirrings of real attachment, curiosity, and longing that chasing often suppresses. Emotional space does not manufacture feelings. It provides the conditions for them to emerge naturally, unforced, and unmistakably. Withdrawing also transforms communication. Conversations become richer, more intentional, and more resonant because they are no longer fueled by need or anxiety. Texts and calls are infused with presence rather than desperation, and meetings are approached with choice rather than compulsion. This shift not only heightens attraction, but also fosters respect. The man begins to see the woman as a full, self-contained being, and in doing so, he starts to treat her as someone whose attention and energy are to be cherished rather than taken for granted. Too often, women believe that their value is measured by the amount of effort they put into a man's life, by the text they send, the calls they make, or the lengths they go to be seen and appreciated. This belief is rooted in an external orientation, a focus on proving worth through action rather than being aware of inherent value. But real magnetism, the kind that draws attention effortlessly, does not come from doing, chasing, or convincing. It comes from presence, the quiet, radiant awareness of oneself that communicates completeness without needing confirmation. Presence is the energy that is felt, not the behaviors that are observed, and it is far more compelling than any pursuit could ever be. When a woman over-pursues, she sends a subtle message of dependence. Every message, invitation, or effort to win him over communicates even unconsciously that her happiness is contingent upon his response. This is not desire, this is need. And while need can sometimes appear temporarily enticing, it ultimately erodes attraction. Men, like all humans, are drawn to wholeness and alignment. They feel alive in the presence of someone whose energy is full, whose life is complete, and whose attention is a choice rather than a necessity. This is the paradox of attraction. The more you honor yourself, the more others are naturally drawn to you. Your value is not in the chase, but in the energy you radiate by existing fully in your own life. Presence is multidimensional. It is not merely being physically in a room or responsive in conversation. It is a state of being that communicates inner alignment. When a woman embodies presence, she is connected to her own emotions, desires, and rhythms. She does not bend or contort herself to fit another's expectations, nor does she measure her worth by the approval she receives. Presence carries the subtle qualities of calm, confidence, and self-possession. It is visible in the way she speaks, in the pauses between words, in the depth of her gaze, and in the way she moves through the world with an unspoken authority. This presence communicates more than words or actions ever could. It signals that she is whole, that she is alive, and that her energy is worth noticing. The act of pursuit, by contrast, is energetic submission. It is giving away power in the hope of gaining attention. Chasing shifts the dynamic from attraction to obligation. A man who is pursued constantly is often unconsciously forced into the role of responder rather than admirer. He notices the effort, yes, but what he senses is a subtle pressure, a dependence, a weight that asks him to provide what is missing inside another. Even when intentions are pure, chasing communicates incompleteness rather than magnetism. Presence, however, communicates the opposite. It reflects wholeness, independence, and the quiet confidence that comes from knowing one's own worth. Being present does not mean being distant or unresponsive. It means cultivating a grounded energy that is not dictated by his availability or attention. When a woman is fully present, she engages deeply in each moment, whether she is speaking to him, laughing with friends, or enjoying solitude. Her energy is rich, dynamic, and self-sustaining. She does not seek validation externally because she knows that her own life, passions, and inner world are sufficient to sustain her joy. This self-sufficiency is magnetic because it signals maturity, integrity, and alignment. It is the essence of value, the understanding that attraction flows naturally when one is fully embodied rather than energetically scattered. Presence also allows for discernment. When a woman values her presence over her pursuit, she becomes aware of the quality of attention she receives. She no longer chases someone who does not see her value because she knows that her worth is inherent and non-negotiable. She can pause, reflect, and allow a man to show up or not without compromise. This creates a space where desire can flourish naturally. Men are instinctively drawn to a woman who does not need to prove herself because they feel the authenticity of her energy. They sense her completeness, and in that sensing, their feelings deepen. Another subtle but powerful aspect of presence is the way it shifts emotional dynamics. A woman who is fully present commands attention effortlessly. Her life, her energy, and her alignment create a gravitational pull that cannot be manufactured through pursuit. Pursuit can temporarily capture attention, but it rarely sustains it. Presence sustains it because it is an expression of energy, not strategy. It allows the other person to enter a space of curiosity and admiration rather than obligation. The relationship, therefore, becomes a meeting of two whole individuals rather than a dynamic of need and supply. Presence also transforms internal experience. When a woman stops measuring her value by pursuit, she releases the anxiety, second-guessing, and tension that chasing creates. She can fully inhabit each moment without expectation or demand. Her energy becomes expansive rather than contracted, allowing attraction to flow naturally. Men respond not to her attempts to win them over, but to the vibrancy, calm, and completeness that radiate from her. This is the essence of authentic attraction. It is not caused, it is felt. It is not achieved through effort, it is recognized through resonance. Ultimately, valuing presence over pursuit is a practice of self-alignment. It is the understanding that the energy we carry is far more persuasive than the actions we take to force attention. When a woman embodies her presence, she steps into a state of power, freedom, and authenticity that cannot be replicated by chasing. She becomes magnetic not because she seeks to be, but because she is fully herself in every moment. She stops proving, stops convincing, and instead allows her energy to speak louder than any words or actions could. Many women make the unconscious mistake of believing that emotions can be forced, that love, attraction, and desire will deepen if enough effort, attention, or persistence is applied. They believe that chasing, pushing, or creating pressure is the way to secure feelings from a man. Yet, the truth is far more subtle, yet infinitely more powerful. Emotions are triggered by freedom, not by pressure. Desire does not grow in response to insistence or anxiety. It awakens when there is space, breathing room, and the absence of coercion. Pressure compresses the heart, and while it may temporarily elicit compliance, it rarely evokes deep, lasting emotion. Freedom, on the other hand, is the soil in which genuine feelings naturally flourish. Pressure is heavy. It can take many forms: repeated messages, frequent calls, attempts to control time together, or subtle emotional nudges. All of these are rooted in the belief that one's energy or effort can create feelings in another person. While this may produce temporary reactions, these reactions are usually superficial. They are the human response to being cornered or prompted, not the stirring of authentic desire. Emotions, at their core, arise from choice and resonance, not obligation. When a man is free to feel, free to reflect, and free to engage on his own terms, the depth of his emotions is allowed to expand naturally. It is freedom, not chasing, that activates the layers of longing, curiosity, and connection. True desire is born when a man perceives that a woman is fully present in her own life, independent of his attention or validation. He senses that her energy is not dependent on his responses. This perception is liberating, not threatening. It invites him to show up willingly, not because he is coerced, but because he feels drawn to the fullness, confidence, and autonomy she radiates. Pressure, in contrast, communicates lack and need, which often activates resistance. The human mind is wired to pull away when it senses constriction. Emotional energy thrives on expansiveness, choice, and autonomy. The moment a woman releases pressure and embraces freedom, she creates the conditions for emotions to awaken, deepen, and sustain themselves naturally. Freedom allows a man to engage his curiosity. When a woman stops pursuing relentlessly, she stops crowding his mind with constant stimuli. He begins to notice details he may have overlooked, the subtle ways she carries herself, the rhythm of her laughter, the depth of her thoughts, and the quality of her presence. These small details, when discovered without pressure, create intrigue and emotional resonance. Desire is not manufactured by effort, it is sparked by observation and reflection. Freedom allows him to pause, consider, and recognize the value he might otherwise take for granted. Pressure short-circuits this process by giving the answers, the attention, and the energy too quickly, leaving no room for his emotional system to respond organically. Emotions also require the perception of choice. When a man feels that his engagement is voluntary, that he is entering connection by his own desire rather than out of obligation, his feelings deepen. Choice empowers him to reflect on what he feels, to acknowledge attraction, and to commit emotionally at a pace aligned with his own inner state. Pressure, however, removes choice. It transforms the dynamic into a cycle of chasing and responding where feelings are elicited rather than allowed to emerge. Freedom, in contrast, creates a fertile emotional landscape in which longing, attachment, and passion can grow without being forced, without guilt, and without manipulation. This principle is closely tied to the concept of presence. When a woman embodies freedom, she communicates confidence, self-possession, and alignment with her own life. She does not chase or beg for attention because she understands that the heart responds most strongly to energy that is complete rather than energy that is anxious or needy. Men are naturally drawn to this state because it evokes admiration, respect, and desire. Freedom does not mean detachment or indifference. It means engagement from a place of choice, awareness, and calm. It signals that a woman's emotions, attention, and energy are her own, and that any engagement is a meeting of two full individuals rather than an imbalanced pull of need and pressure. Pressure also clouds perception. When a man feels pursued, his mind and nervous system may interpret the energy as obligation rather than attraction. He may comply superficially, respond politely, or maintain a presence, but the depth of feeling is often stifled. Freedom, by contrast, allows his emotional system to operate without interference. He begins to reflect on what he feels, to notice what is missing, and to experience a sense of longing that arises naturally. The emotional response is authentic because it is chosen, not coerced. The subtle power of freedom is that it awakens desire while maintaining dignity for both parties, allowing connection to deepen organically rather than being forced into artificial intensity. Withdrawal, space, and non-chasing are all manifestations of this principle. By stepping back, by allowing silence, by reducing pressure, a woman creates an invisible yet palpable field of freedom. Within this field, emotions awaken. Curiosity sparks, admiration grows, and desire emerges without interference. Men feel drawn not because they are compelled, but because their hearts have been given room to respond in their own time and in their own way. The dance of attraction shifts from frantic pursuit to magnetic resonance, from obligation to genuine longing, from superficial compliance to deep emotional engagement. Silence is one of the most powerful tools a woman can wield in the realm of attraction and emotional connection. It is often misunderstood as indifference, coldness, or withdrawal, but in reality, it is a profound form of communication. When a woman allows herself to embrace silence, she creates a space in which a man begins to notice, reflect, and feel in ways that chasing or over-communicating never allows. Silence is magnetic because it is the quiet presence of self-possession. It signals that her attention, energy, and emotions are deliberate, not automatic. The power of silence lies in the way it amplifies awareness, both in herself and in him, and it awakens emotions that were dormant under the weight of constant pursuit. When a woman constantly speaks, texts, or seeks engagement, a man's mind can become accustomed to her presence. He may listen, respond, or participate, but rarely does he stop to reflect deeply on her value or her essence. Over-communication can create habituation, a sense that she is always there, always accessible, and always available. This familiarity, though seemingly comforting, can dull emotional intensity. The brain stops registering her presence as significant because it is expected. Silence interrupts this pattern. By stepping back from constant engagement, a woman forces the mind to pause, to consider, and to notice details that had previously gone unseen. The absence of words creates room for reflection, longing, and awareness. Silence does not require disengagement, it requires intentionality. It is not about ignoring or punishing him, it is about holding one's energy with awareness and purpose. A woman who masters this principle understands that her value is expressed not through the volume of her communication, but through the weight of her presence. When she chooses silence, she communicates confidence, self-respect, and inner authority. The man senses this energy intuitively. He notices subtleties, the way she carries herself, the nuance in her tone when she does speak, the calm radiance of a woman who is not emotionally or energetically dictated by his attention. Her silence invites him to feel, to reflect, and to awaken emotionally because he is no longer guided by her constant efforts or reassurances. The amplification of awareness works on multiple levels. Emotionally, silence allows a man to encounter the woman without distraction or noise. When there is constant chatter, updates, or attempts to fill the space. Feelings can be overshadowed by the energy of pursuit. Withdrawal of this noise creates a kind of emotional mirror, reflecting back to him what he may have taken for granted. He begins to notice her presence more deeply, to feel her absence more keenly, and to recognize the impact she has on his emotional landscape. This is not manipulation. It is the natural effect of allowing space for reflection, for the human mind and heart to process the value and energy of another. Silence also cultivates mystery, which is an essential element of attraction. When a woman does not constantly explain, justify, or overshare, she retains a sense of intrigue. The unknown becomes fertile ground for curiosity, admiration, and desire. Men are drawn to what is not entirely accessible because the mind seeks resolution and understanding. Silence encourages him to explore, to observe, and to consider, creating a depth of awareness that cannot exist in the presence of relentless pursuit. The subtleties of her personality, her choices, and her energy become more pronounced because they are experienced in the absence of constant noise. Importantly, silence amplifies awareness both inwardly and outwardly. For the woman, it is an opportunity to reconnect with her own energy, desires, and boundaries. She no longer disperses her energy in the hope of eliciting a response. Instead, she focuses on alignment, self-possession, and presence. For the man, her silence is an invitation to engage with her essence rather than her behaviors. He begins to sense the gravity of her energy, to recognize the depth of her character, and to feel the significance of her presence. This awareness is the foundation for authentic connection because it arises from reflection and choice rather than compulsion or habit. The power of silence is also evident in its ability to reset emotional dynamics. When a woman ceases chasing and instead embodies calm, observant, quiet, she shifts the energy from reactive to magnetic. A man's attention is no longer assumed, it must be earned through resonance, awareness, and choice. This shift awakens his senses, prompting him to notice her more deeply, to evaluate his feelings, and to recognize the value she holds. Emotional intensity increases because it is now generated internally within him rather than being externally prompted. Silence in this way becomes the most effective amplifier of desire, curiosity, and longing. Silence is not about playing games, it is about alignment. It communicates that a woman is fully aware of her worth and that her energy is her own. She does not need to chase or explain to prove value, and in this energetic clarity she becomes magnetic. Men respond not to the words she withholds, but to the energy she embodies. Her silence is rich, deliberate, and full of unspoken power. It awakens reflection, deepens awareness, and invites genuine emotional engagement in a way that noise and pursuit never can. Magnetism is often misunderstood as a tactic, something that can be learned through manipulation, carefully crafted words, or strategic behavior. Many women believe that if they say the right thing, text at the right time, or act in certain ways, they can create attraction and hold a man's attention. Yet true magnetism is not a strategy, it is a state of being. It is an energy that emanates from alignment, presence, and self-possession rather than from external efforts to control or influence someone else's feelings. Understanding this principle is liberating because it shifts the focus from trying to achieve attraction to cultivating the inner state from which attraction naturally flows. When a woman approaches connection from strategy, she is often unconsciously signaling need, control, or incompleteness. She focuses on outcomes, on whether he will respond in the desired way, or on trying to elicit a certain emotion. Strategy requires effort, calculation, and often anxiety because it is rooted in the belief that her energy alone is insufficient to create attraction. Men may notice the results temporarily, but the energy behind strategy lacks authenticity and depth. It is conditional and transactional rather than magnetic. True magnetism, in contrast, arises when a woman embodies her own fullness, independence, and inner alignment. It is a natural byproduct of being fully herself rather than a performance intended to produce a desired reaction. Magnetism as a state is inseparable from self-awareness. It begins with the recognition that attraction is an energy exchange, not a checklist of behaviors. A woman who embodies this state understands that her worth is inherent and not dependent on the attention, approval, or validation of a man. She lives in alignment with her own values, passions, and desires. Her energy is coherent, expansive, and steady. This coherence communicates power and confidence without the need for explanation. Men are instinctively drawn to this energy because it signals wholeness, depth, and authenticity, qualities that no strategy can replicate. The state of magnetism also requires emotional sovereignty. A woman who is magnetic does not give her emotional energy away indiscriminately or allow her mood to be dictated by his behavior. She is grounded in her own sense of self, which allows her to engage from curiosity rather than need. She does not chase, manipulate, or perform. Instead, she radiates presence, calm, and self-possession. This state activates natural attraction because it mirrors the energy that men are wired to respond to: independence, authenticity, and aligned desire. Unlike strategy, which can be detected subconsciously and often repels over time, the state of magnetism grows stronger the more she inhabits it. Magnetism as a state also thrives on subtlety. It is rarely loud, obvious, or overt. It does not demand attention through effort. It naturally draws attention through energy. When a woman is fully embodied in this state, her presence is felt before words are spoken. Her laughter carries a weight, her gaze communicates depth, and her movements are imbued with intention. Men respond to these cues instinctively, often without conscious understanding, because the energy signals completeness, autonomy, and emotional richness. The difference between state and strategy is precisely this: strategy relies on action and intention to elicit a response, whereas state relies on energy and alignment to evoke attraction naturally. Another key aspect of magnetism as a state is its sustainability. Strategy requires constant maintenance. It demands observation, adjustment, and performance. A woman must continually calculate her actions to produce results, and this is exhausting and ultimately unsatisfying. The state of magnetism, however, is self-sustaining because it is rooted in internal alignment rather than external outcomes. When she embodies this state, attraction becomes effortless. Men are drawn to her energy repeatedly because it is consistent, resonant, and authentic. This is why some women can command attention and desire without trying, while others who follow endless strategies struggle to maintain connection despite all effort. Magnetism as a state also transforms the dynamic of relationships. It shifts connection from a game of pursuit and compliance to a meeting of two full individuals. When a woman operates from a strategic mindset, interactions are transactional. She gives, he responds; she acts, he reacts. In contrast, when she embodies a magnetic state, interactions are energetic. She radiates fullness, he responds naturally, and the emotional exchange is alive, dynamic, and mutual. This state allows desire to flourish, feelings to deepen, and connection to become more meaningful because it is based on resonance rather than obligation. Ultimately, magnetism as a state is inseparable from self-mastery. It requires a woman to cultivate her own presence, energy, and emotional alignment independently of external validation. She must be willing to observe her own patterns of need and chasing, to step back when necessary, and to anchor herself in the knowledge of her inherent worth. When she does, her energy communicates an unspoken power, a vibrancy, calm, and authenticity that cannot be taught or copied. Men are drawn to this naturally, not because of clever tactics, but because energy communicates truth in ways words and strategies never can. This principle liberates women from the exhausting cycle of trying to control attention and affection. It shifts focus from producing desired outcomes to cultivating inner alignment. Magnetism becomes an effortless expression of who she is rather than what she does. She no longer worries about chasing, proving, or performing. Instead, she embodies a state that naturally draws attention, evokes curiosity, and deepens desire. It is the energy of completeness, presence, and self-possession that awakens feelings in others, far beyond what any strategy could ever achieve.